Hey, if you were into hard rock, heavy metal back in the 1980s, this video is for you. What I have here is a Hit Parader Yearbook magazine. So this is from fall of 1984, hard rock edition. And I looked at this one. What made me want to talk about it is the first thing I did is I just saw this list going down the side, and it was kind of a reminder of how much great stuff we had back in the 80s. I mean, you look at 1984, these are the bands that were so popular back then. I mean, starting with Motley Crue, Van Halen, Def Leppard, Ozzy, Quiet Riot, Billy Squier, Iron Maiden, Judas Priest, and just keep going down the list. I mean, just take a look at that. It's amazing, all of the great stuff that we had back then. Anyway, so I'm going to flip through this, and we're not going to spend a lot of time on the articles or anything. We'll come back and read some of these later, but just wanted to share this with you because I just thought I think these things are so much fun to flip through. So open it up to the first page, and who do we have there on the very first page? We have Quiet Riot, all holding Hit Parader magazines. Look at this. Quiet Riot's Carlos Cavazo, Frankie Banali, and Kevin Dubrow always take time out of their hectic schedule to pick up their favorite magazine, Hit Parader. It's a gas, says Frankie. Anyway, there's a Quiet Riot. Here's your table of contents. Got Eddie Van Halen, Vince Neil, and John Cougar. Interesting, putting him in the hard rock version of the magazine. So here we go. Okay, so we start off here with a little bit of Iron Maiden. That could not be much of a worse picture of Adrian Smith. Anyway, there's Adrian Smith. And I think it's also interesting looking at some of these pictures because this is 1984. They're still on the Peace of Mind. They're still off of that album. The Powerslave was going to be, actually would have come out probably right around the time this magazine did, because Powerslave came out in September of 84, but you can see they're still talking about Peace of Mind. And I always think it's interesting when they would publish some of these magazines where they would, what looks like reversing the negative, because sometimes you'll see guys that are right-handed guitar players playing left-handed. And I grabbed my Peace of Mind vinyl so you could see this, and it's nothing really earth-shattering, but it's just kind of interesting to look at that they had flipped they'd flipped it around backwards. So this is the vinyl, and then that's your advertisement there, or your article right there. Anyway, whatever. Not that big a deal. I just always find that interesting that happens sometimes where they get those negatives flipped around. So let's see here. Turning the page. There's Bruce with those kind of colorful pants that we see him wearing sometimes. And this woman back behind him, apparently there was some sort of a contest or something that she won, so they took her up on stage or something like this. Did you miss great Hit Parader Special Collector's Edition? If so, order now. Only $3.50. Postpaid, interesting. And now we have Def Leppard. So since this is fall of 1984, these guys are still on Pyromania. And Hysteria wouldn't come out until August of 87. Now, this article, so when Rick Allen had his accident was in December of this year. So this article was published before that which really caused a lot of chaos, obviously, in the band. There's Steve Clark, Joe Elliott, obviously. Looks like this is an interview with Joe Elliott. We'll come back. We've actually, if you follow this channel, you've seen we've actually gone back and done a couple of these articles. We'll come back. This one looks really interesting. Like I really want to come back and read some of these. Of course, there's the band, Rick Savage, Rick Allen, Joe Elliott, Steve Clark, and then Phil Collen. Then we have Twisted Sister. There's a little Dee Snider there for you. Peter Wolf. It's interesting to see these people that they kind of mix into this group when it starts talking about, what did they call this? The Hard Rock Edition? Yeah, the Hard Rock Edition. Because Peter Wolf, of course, was with Jay Giles. And it was interesting back then, and you probably, if you're around my age or so, you'd remember this, that those terms like heavy metal and hard rock were thrown around to mean so many different things. And to the point today that I actually have a hard time saying heavy metal unless I'm talking about something very specific that I know that we can classify that way, because back then it was used so widely that it kind of lost its meaning. Anyway, so Hit Parader Heavy Metal Hotline. This looks like it was some sort of a newsletter or something you could get that was specifically related to heavy metal. Subscribe today, you'll never regret it. And there, of course, is a picture of Jimmy Page. Now we have Queensryche. Queensryche, this would have been right around the time The Warning came out. And I don't know about you, I know we have a video on this channel about this. I bought the EP. A friend of mine had played it for me, and I just loved it, so I went and bought it. You remember the Queensryche EP just had those 4 songs on it. It was something that they'd produced themselves, and it was honestly it was pretty awesome for a homegrown record. By the time The Warning came out, because there was all these announcements, and boy, we were all so excited for that album to come out. I'll be honest with you, I bought The Warning probably the day it was released because I was so excited about it. And I think a lot of people I've talked to about this share this same kind of thing. It was good, don't get me wrong, it was actually a really good album. There was some really good stuff on it, but it was kind of a letdown. We had built ourselves up so far for what this first Queensryche like full-length album was going to be like, that when it came out, it was like, it's good. As a matter of fact, if we hadn't built ourselves up so much for it, it probably would have been a lot better. But they'd kind of had this mythological thing that had kind of been following around just because that EP had become such a big deal. Anyway, I loved them. And then I just kept buying all their albums, and I actually really liked them. It was just that, again, that album when it came out was just a little bit of a letdown. This is interesting. This looks like some guitar you could buy for only $223 with a free case. But you'll see here, for those people that are guitar players, again, that are about my age, if it's by Hondo, that was kind of the budget guitar back in the 80s, but they always had these really cool shapes and things. Of course, here's Motley Crue. And this is interesting too, because so they were on the Shout at the Devil tour, I guess, or they were still living off of Shout the Devil because Theater of Pain wouldn't come out till 1985. And I got one other thing out because we did a video about Motley Crue, I think just a few days ago. And I just thought it was interesting to look at this because I kind of find the costumes and things interesting, because if you look here on the inside of Shout at the Devil, and then you look here, you'll see that it's the same. This must have been during the same photo shoot, something like that. Anyway, I don't know. Just those little connections I think are kind of interesting. So these are a bunch of what would have been their promo photos off of Shout at the Devil. So let's see here. There's Vince, obviously, Tommy, there's the band, and then Mick Mars. And then this is pretty interesting. So when Lick It Up came out, this was in September of 83, and then it was September of 84 that Animalize came out. And we've talked about that on this channel a little bit, but here's something kind of interesting. So Animalize had either just come out or was just about to come out when this magazine was released. And because it's fall, it was probably laid out and organized and sent to print probably before Animalize was actually released. So this is kind of interesting right here. So Kiss from the left. Now, of course, Lick It Up, if you don't know, was the album they put out where they took their makeup off. And this was one of the promo shots from that period. And of course, you had Paul Stanley, Vinnie Vincent, Eric Carr, and Gene Simmons. Now, this is kind of interesting because, especially if you look at the date, because this is 84, and the album Lick It Up had come out a year earlier. So Kiss from left, Paul Stanley, Vinnie Vincent, Eric Carr, Gene Simmons, and look what it says here. Mark Norton has replaced Vinnie. So now, who's Mark Norton? Just in case you're wondering, Mark Leslie Norton is actually Mark St. John. So although they had the promo picture from the Lick It Up period, Animalize was getting ready to get released, and Animalize now had a new guitarist, which was Mark St. John, and then of course his time in the band was very short. But anyway, that was, he went by the name Mark St. John in Kiss, and it was similar with Vinnie Vincent. Vinnie Vincent was not his name. It was Vincent Cusano was actually his name. But that was just this short little period that Vinnie Vincent was in the band. And then they just made that announcement here, Mark Norton, who again was Mark St. John. And then there's Gene with Finger in Nose. Here's Kiss with Vinnie Vincent playing live. And then Styx. I did a video on Styx recently, and we had this really funny comment that somebody made on the video. We had so many comments on that video. It was really, I love going and reading all the comments that people put, even the ones where everybody criticizes my singing. Because I have a habit of, when I'm trying to think of a song, I will sing it so people watching or whoever I'm talking to will remember the song, and then people don't always like that. But anyway, so somebody made a comment that was pretty funny, and he made a comment that once Dennis DeYoung cut his mustache off, it was like there must have been magic in that, because somehow the magic of Styx, things changed. And it was really funny when I saw that. So, but it is, when you look at this picture right here of these guys. I was a Styx fan. I've got so much of their stuff. I mean, I probably have 5 copies of Paradise Theater. I've got a couple different versions of Cornerstone. I have, obviously, from a video we did last week, I have a few different versions of Styx 2. Anyway, I actually really like the band. But there's always kind of these funny little things about them. And I love this picture because does this not look like they went into like Sears or Kmart and had a family photo done? I mean, isn't that what it looks like? And then when you take Dennis DeYoung, and he's got that short haircut, he lost the mustache, and he looks like he could be playing in a new wave band now. And it was just the whole thing, just when they hit that Kilroy period, it just went off the rails. Now, at this point, just to put this in context, Kilroy came out in '83. So this was not, so it was kind of during the Kilroy period, but this actually would have been after Caught in the Act was released, because Caught in the Act came out in '84. And I actually have Caught in the Act in the collection too. So, but anyway, that's what's going on here. And what's so interesting then, when you start looking at the story of Styx, Kilroy is what started tearing that band apart, and then Caught in the Act, it was kind of over for all intents and purposes after that for a while. And so anyway, I just saw this article and I just started thinking about that. Here we go. On their new album, Caught in the Act, Styx has captured much of the majesty of the Kilroy tour. And those of you that don't know, the Kilroy tour was it was very controversial, and a lot of people did not like that, because people show up to this Styx show expecting this rock and roll show because they had so much great music. They were one of these great 70s rock and roll bands. And then for the first, I don't know, I didn't see it, kind of young at the time. I think for the first 10, 20 minutes, something like that, basically they're doing a play, because Dennis DeYoung had gotten into this mindset of making these kind of concept albums, and he was taking it a step further with Kilroy, and then wanted to have this, what was for all intents and purposes, like a musical, a play on stage. And Tommy Shaw talks about it today, and he was just super embarrassed about it. And it really, really ended up kind of tearing the band apart. Scorpions. I loved the Scorpions back then. Now, this would have been during the Love at First Sting time period. And this kind of is the classic lineup. I mean, this was the lineup that did Blackout. And I saw them kind of in between tours. So I saw them on the Blackout tour, but they were selling Love at First Sting t-shirts. This was 1983. So it was before Love at First Sting came out in February of '84. But that ended up being, I think, maybe their biggest selling album. It was one that had Rock You Like a Hurricane on it, which ended up being just such a huge, huge song. For me, Blackout was was the pinnacle from a Scorpion standpoint. I mean, that was just, they had every song on that album. Every song on that album was top shelf. There was not a throwaway song on that album as far as I was concerned. You go back through the Scorpions catalog in either direction from Blackout, and in my opinion, there's a few throwaways on a lot of those records. But Blackout was just, everything about it was top shelf. But I mean, they were so big when they got to this point with Love at First Sting, and I thought they were a great live band, and they're still doing it. They're still around. Gary Moore, not somebody we hear about a lot. He basically, for a time, maybe the thing that he was best known for was playing in Thin Lizzy. And anyway, just not somebody that we think about a lot these days. Here we're getting back into a little bit of Judas Priest right there. There's Rob Halford, obviously. And then here's more Priest. I think when I glanced at this picture earlier, I think this picture was taken from the You Got Another Thing Coming music video. Correct me if I'm wrong. Maybe somebody out there maybe has seen that, and maybe I have that wrong, but I'm pretty sure that's what it was. This was, of course, during the Defenders of the Faith period, because Defenders came out actually at the beginning of 1984, in January of 1984. I loved Judas Priest. I saw them. That was the first time I saw them, was on the Defenders of the Faith tour. And I thought that was my favorite. Again, my favorite album for me for Judas Priest was the one right before that, which was Screaming for Vengeance. But Defenders had so much great stuff on it. It was so good. Joan Jett, she's somebody that kind of became legendary, obviously. April Wine, I've got a few of their records. I think I have Nature of the Beast and Power Play. And I never knew what to make of them. They had some cool songs, and I never fell in love with them, but I liked a lot of their stuff, so I bought some of their records. But Ted Nugent, I always liked Ted Nugent. I thought he was such a good guitar player. He has such this huge personality, and when you see him on stage, he's so entertaining. He's just, there's really something. I saw him in must have been 86, which is a while after. I mean, he was, even though they're putting him in this magazine, his career was not what it was. He's way past his prime at this point. And when I saw him, he played at this place. I was living in Salt Lake City, or I was living in Utah at the time, and we went to see him in Salt Lake City at a place called the Salt Palace. And it was so amazing because the tickets were $5. And it was $5, yeah. And we went and saw Ted Nugent for $5, and that place was filled, and it was wild. He was so entertaining. It was so much fun. It was so crazy. But at this period, when this magazine is being printed, this was during the time of an album that he put out called Penetrator, and he put this album out in February of '84. And what made Penetrator interesting? There it is. Actually, it says it right there. What made Penetrator interesting was, like a lot of his albums, he only sang some of the songs. He had another singer that sang a lot of it. But the singer that he had on this album was a guy named Brian Howe. And Brian Howe, this was really kind of the first time we saw him on a bigger stage, if you will. Where he really then kind of became more of a household name was after this, when he went and joined Bad Company. And he was, and I actually saw Bad Company with Brian Howe singing for them. They were opening up, I think they were opening up for 38 Special. And anyway, but Brian Howe, if you've never heard this, go look up the song Tied Up in Love. And it's, because as I recall on this album, I've got a couple copies of this album too. I actually really liked it. The whole first side, Brian Howe was singing lead, and then on the second side, it was Ted Nugent. It was so interesting that he used to get another singer to come in and sing for him, because I thought he had a great singing voice. So it was always interesting to me that he always had somebody else also singing the songs for him. But anyway, I always liked Ted. I find him entertaining. I think he's cool. Night Ranger, I have a video. I think I put a video out on this channel a month or so back where I talk about my experience getting Dawn Patrol. I loved that album. I loved Dawn Patrol so much. I thought it was such a spectacular record. And I loved it so much that I kept buying all their other records when they kept coming out. my opinion, they never put anything else out that was as good as Dawn Patrol. That was just, again, it was one of those albums where I think just about every song I liked on the album. It was just everything about it was good. I like Jack Blade's voice better than Kelly Keagy's, but he's, you know, this is a band though where you had the 2 lead singers. Of course, you had Brad Gillis, who not long prior to this was playing with Ozzy just for that one album, Speak of the Devil, replacing Randy Rhoads temporarily. Jeff Watson was kind of became really well known for some kind of unique guitar technique, and then Alan Fitzgerald was the keyboard player. Always kind of an odd character. Billy Squier, I loved Billy Squier. I was such a huge fan of this guy. Don't Say No is, to this day, I think one of the greatest rock albums, definitely of the 80s, and maybe one of the greatest rock albums ever. And so Don't Say No was incredible. I mean, front to back, start to finish, and it was really the thing that put him on the map. I remember when I was a kid, I was just kind of becoming aware of rock music at the time, and we would hear The Stroke being played on the radio all the time. All the time that song was being played. Then, of course, the next album came out, which was Emotions in Motion. That song had, I think, maybe 3 songs that I thought were just top shelf songs, and the rest of it was okay. And then what was out at this time was an album called Signs of Life. And that's the album where people believe and talk about that the music video that supposedly, you know, ruined his career. And I mean, it's become kind of part of hard rock lore today, that when he did the song Rock Me Tonight, which I actually liked the tune, I thought it was a really cool tune, that the music video for Rock Me Tonight, actually, people say, well, that ruined his career. I push back on that, and people do not like me for pushing back on that idea, but I've got to just tell you, I don't think it was the music video, because how many people in the world really saw that music video? I mean, I saw it, and it was weird, but I didn't care, because Billy Squier kind of always had that kind of weird energy about him that he did that stuff. I mean, if you ever saw him in concert and you saw that video, it was kind of like, it's kind of how he acts sometimes in concerts, and has that kind of weird sexual energy that he had. I don't think it was that song. I think it was the problem that so many bands that get really, really huge and then they disappear. He fell victim of the same thing. It's just that his music wasn't good. I was such a big fan. Don't Say No was awesome front to back. Emotions in Motion was really, really, really good. Signs of Life had, in my opinion, it had 2 really good songs on there. One of them was Rock Me Tonight. And then I loved him so much, even though there was only a couple of good songs in it, I kept buying his records. I kept buying them because I just liked him. I liked his music. And so when people say, well, that ruined his career, even he admits it, everybody admits it, and I go, yeah, maybe, but imagine if Don't Say No had been released after Signs of Life. Like, in other words, if Don't Say No hadn't existed and he was a rock star and Signs of Life had come out and he'd done that goofy music video and whatever, and Don't Say No came out after that, I don't think his career would have fallen apart, because that album was so good. Having a good album and good songs erases a lot of mistakes. And I again, push back on me for saying that, but everybody's looking for an excuse why their career falls apart, and more often than not, it's because you stop writing good songs. You lose your way. You lose the eye of the tiger, if you will, that thing, that drive, that energy or whatever it was that made those great songs that made people fall in love with you. When you get rich and famous, you just kind of lose it. And then the music suffers. And then the career suffers. And then he goes, oh, it was just that dumb video. Man, maybe. But I think that how many people in the world really, really saw that video? And it just got to a point where it's like, I don't know. His music's not that great. Sorry, just wasn't. And so, because I kept buying his records. I was a fan. He wasn't losing. I was still a fan even after that video, even after seeing it a bunch of times. I didn't care. It was weird. Anyway, just my opinion. Tony Iommi, speaking of mustaches, that, you know, it's kind of funny that that guy made that comment, because Tony Iommi always had that awesome handlebar mustache. And there was a period of time in the late 70s, I don't remember what album it was on with Black Sabbath, that he shaved that mustache off. And interestingly, Black Sabbath started going awry. When Tony shaved his mustache off, there must be something. I'm not usually a mustache guy, but maybe there's something to that. The magic goes away when you lose it. Because here he had I thought that mustache always looked so cool on Tony Iommi. Anyway, he's one of my, I love Black Sabbath. He's awesome. Matter of fact, his book too, I can't even think of what it's called. I think it's Heaven and Hell, My Life Through Heaven and Hell, something like that. It's really interesting listening, or I do a lot of audiobooks. His book is really fascinating. Of course, there's Angus Young, one of the greats, except, so this would have been, they would have still been on the balls to the wall period at this point. I mean, who is more just unique than Udo Dirkseiner? That guy, just this little, what was he, 5'3", just this short little German guy with that blood curdling voice. Man, he was just awesome. And I think I have a video on this channel where I talk about the first time I heard them, and it was on the Restless and Wild album when I heard Fast as a Shark, which is just such a great tune. Actually, that album is just spectacular. And then, of course, Balls to the Wall was after that. And that song, Balls to the Wall, is so great. There's Wolf Hoffman. I think he today has shaved his head and he's a photographer or something like that. All right, then, here we are in the centerfold. And there is Judas Priest, and in all their glory. So anyway, we've been going on for a while, so we'll do part 2 of this magazine on another day. But this is a good place to wrap it up. So please, hey, if you aren't following the channel at this point, please follow the channel. And please like the video. We'd love to get your feedback, your thoughts about all these different bands, all this music, all this stuff, your memories about this. We'd really love to hear from you. And with that, have yourself a fantastic day.